Good evening, all. We're set. Ooh. Jamie, how are you? Mark, Dino, Tony. Hi, Tony. Sue, Chris, Ledge, Billy. Seems we're getting quite a few before we've even started opening up. So, Lavinia. By the way, I've just seen an article. Jamie Carragher has gone in two-footed. I think this is a great debate. He's asked the question, are England producing a nation of soft coaches or soft players? And the reason he's asked the question, because there's been so many failed England attempts and the way that we are playing football as a nation and as English players coming through the academy. And he's posed the question, are we producing a nation full of soft players? And he's made one or two assumptions, and they may be purposeful, as to why. So this might be a great breeding ground for a conversation in the next 2 weeks. Okay. Evening, everybody. Okay, Chef, when you're ready. Okay, so tonight, or let me go back. Last week was deep. Spoke about suicide last week, and Megan was really good. Megan Feeney was really good. She met 3 or 4 people off the back of the conversations, and I know that they've met up in the last week. This is real story. This is real talk. These are people that need help, reached out, and I'm so delighted and chuffed when I heard that people were meeting to help, assist, and aid one another, to offer guidance and direction. And these are the reasons for the talks. Doesn't mean I'm right. Got no problem with people's opinion. But I believe that stimulating conversation and debate will provide outcomes, discussions that we can all agree on. So that's why we do it. Not because I'm right, I don't know the answers to everything, but I am not scared to tackle any subject and give you my honest opinion compared to what I read and to biblically what I study. Evening, everybody. Evening, Uncle Sam, Dave. Okay, let's get ready to roll on this one. So today is watered down a little bit. I got asked to do a Q&A. Didn't do a Q&A. I said, you know what? We'll leave the Q&A for another time. So we're just going to talk about social media and the power of social media for the next half an hour or so. And I always try and describe why this started. So, probably 6 months ago, I had a family friend who was going through difficult times, and they asked me, as somebody they thought was sensible, to come up with certain paragraphs on a Sunday morning that might help them through life. So that's what I did for the next 2 months. Every Sunday morning I would type stuff on Facebook and just say, evening Gregory, and just say, you know, hopefully this would help. And it did over a period of time. But what I found was the people reading and commenting on the status were getting more and more and more. And then I got asked and challenged to do a very, very serious one on Islamophobia and the group that call themselves I something. And I couldn't do it justice on Facebook. And I must have had 8 or 9 attempts to type something, could not do it justice. So I nearly bottled it. And a friend of mine said, well, if you can't do it, why don't you go live? And to what I said, what do you mean go live? So when I put it out live, then what I found was there was such a hunger and a thirst for more that people behind the scenes were talking. You know, I'd still be talking to people an hour later after I'd come off the live chats. I'd be getting text messages, and I found that the audience was growing weekly, and people had a thirst. And believe you me, there are people out there struggling with all sorts of things and problems. And they email or text, and we then obviously have a debate the following Sunday. But because of the seriousness of last week's Sunday, which was suicide, I thought this week's Sunday's got to be a little bit more watered down. So we're going to talk about social media and the impact of it. I hear a lot of parents, social media is good, Mark. He says, social media brings us closer to the likes of you, Jono. Social media can be a lifeline for many people. And I truly agree with that if social media is used in the correct format, in the correct forum. And it's so important that we understand the power of what social media is and what it can do. Craig says, like all things in life, it has its good and bad points. Brian says, if it wasn't for social media, I'd never have met you and become a friend of yours. You helped cycling for Harry massively, bro. We'll never forget that, lad. And a pleasure to know you. Oh, that's a really nice message, Brian. You're right. If it wasn't for social media, we would never have met. And it's a pleasure to have met you and know you and your family. Cherie, how are you? So, considering that the world is, there's 7.3 billion people on the planet. The internet has 3.17 billion users. So there's 7.3 billion people on the planet. Half of those are internet users, and there are 2.3 billion users of social media. 2.3 billion users of social media. 91% of all retail brands use 2 or more social media outlets. So majority of all the high, retail shops, watch stores, you name it, they are all on social media. 91% realize the pull that social media now has. Internet users on average have at least 5 social media accounts. So that one might be Twitter, one might be Facebook, one might be LinkedIn, one might be Snapchat, and one might be, I don't know. There's that many. There's just 2. There's so many which we'll go into. Social media. Lovely to see you today. Hi, Linda. It was really good to see you at Grandma's as well today. Remind me of my past. All good though. So social media users have risen by 176 million in the last year. 176 million in the last year. That equates to every second there's 12 people joining one of the social media sites. Sam says, Craig says, for us, social media helps us promote our charity needs, both parents, for which for us, small charity is fantastic, brilliant. Sam says, using social media like you is a massive positive, so like you do great food for the brain. Very good. Agreed. Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp handle 60 billion messages a day. Ben says social media is good if it's used in the right way. Sadly, too many people abuse it and use it for wrong and use it to brainwash vulnerable people, including conspiracy theory pages etc. used in the right way, it can be one of the greatest inventions. So these are some of the sites that I'm not too sure about all of them. I don't know all of them. I don't use any some of these. I have a Facebook page, obviously. I have a LinkedIn page and a Twitter page. I'm not sure if there's any. Well, listen to these. So these are the social media outlets that we can use. 4channel has 11 million users. Airbnb has 50 million users. Facebook has 1.7 billion users. Flickr has 112 million users. Google has 300 million users. Instagram has 400 million users. LinkedIn has 450 million users. MySpace has 50.6 million users. Periscope has 10 million users. Pinterest has 100 million users. Reddit has 36 million accounts. Snapchat has 100 million users. Twitter has 320 million users. WeChat has 1.12 million users. Weibo has 600 million users. WhatsApp has 900 million users. And YouTube has over 1 billion users. So far and outweighing everybody else, Facebook has 1.70 billion users. When you consider that there's only 7.3 billion people on the planet, Facebook has 1.7 billion users. Tony says, I've not heard of most of those, or is it because I'm getting old? I'm not going to comment on that. So, regardless of what we say, and I can delve into some real sad stats. There's stats on everything here. Google processes, I'll read you a couple of stats for each. Google processes 100 billion searches a month. That's an average of 40,000 searches per second. That's Google. Google has answered 450 billion unique queries since 2003. Facebook adds 500,000 new users every day. That's 6 new profiles every second. Half of the internet users who do not use Facebook themselves live with someone who does. There's an estimated 81 million fake Facebook profiles. Yes, Stato. Twitter. There is 1.3 billion Twitter accounts. 500 million people visit Twitter each month. YouTube, 300 hours of video are uploaded every minute. Instagram, over 80 million photos are uploaded each and every day. LinkedIn has 450 million members. There's just so many stats, you could just crawl through it forever. But the bottom line is, whether we all like it or not, social media is here to stay. So we have a lot of youngsters who obviously now, Mark, how are you? We've got a lot of youngsters who use these social platforms to air certain differences, to get the messages out, to show people potentially how they look, how they are, how they're feeling. And this is the key with the social media outlets, which everybody's got to get their mind around. I hear so many parents saying, oh, I'm too old for this. I don't want to get into it. It's not me. But it's important that you have some kind of idea of what's going on, because there's a world which is wide open and accessible to your children. So as a parent, you need to have a degree of understanding as to what is happening out there, because in the wrong hands or sitting behind the computer at the wrong time is accessible to lots of people who don't have the similar interest that me and you would have on the social media sites. So we use it for great purposes. We use it for great PR. We use it to get certain messages out. But that's not everybody's intent. Some people's intent is to trawl on there to find youngsters who potentially are weak, youngsters who potentially could be lulled or pulled. Youngsters, and that doesn't mean just for sexual gratification neither. That could be to join certain sects, join certain groups, as the I group, which is, blowing up every Tom, Dick and Harry. So you have to have an understanding of what are some of these social media sites doing. How do you use them? How do you make sure you educate your child on them? How do you make sure you guide and protect your children on it? Because it's there, it's open, and there's no point in saying they can't go on it, because eventually they'll go on it anyway when they get older. But what you need to be able to do is to educate our children the importance of using this in the right and proper way. If using the right and proper way, I believe it's a fantastic tool. It is a great tool. And I'm communicating with you now through social media. You're watching me through social media. The PR, it's now funny because a lot of, players, sports personalities are releasing their own PR, their own things about their career before the media gets it. So now some of the media stories, what you read, are backed up because they're just clipping what people have said on Twitter or on Facebook or on their own Snapchat, whatever it may be. So it's also a great PR. It's also a great way of getting things out about events, charity causes. There's so many positive things that social media is available for. It's also good as well to keep in contact with loved ones. So through the social media sites, I have family way down in Jamaica and Canada and other places that through social media I can keep in regular contact with. Back in the day we got along with it. Back in the day we got along with it without it. Emma says, my 9-year-old has lessons at school on how to stay safe online, but I will never allow him to go into social media. And I think that's the important thing. I think there's got to be a degree of sensibleness about what age should a child be allowed to go on these sort of social media sites. The correct age, from what I'm hearing, is 13. And I think what they're trying to say is that a young adult who will have all the faculties and awareness about being safe online. And that's really the gist of what we're trying to say here, is that it's a fantastic tool, but not everybody has the same intentions as we do, which are watching this. So it's important that the education and the awareness of what to look out for, and if somebody might not be asking the right sort of questions. And if you're not in and around, and if you're not checking, and if you're not making sure that you're logging in at a certain time and seeing what's coming through, particularly at a young age, then you are leaving your child open and accessible to everything out which is on the social media sites. And some of it, and some of the people behind the screen, do not have the same intention as we possibly would do. Last week's topic is a clear sign of positive in social media. When discussing such a tough subject, I remember there were two ladies who were tuned in and became friends. It was brilliant last week, Craig. There was ladies and men that became friends and actually met behind this week and offered each other support around such a real strong subject as suicide. Hence, this week we had to tailor it down because last week was really powerful. There was times last week I had a minute silence because I knew, and not guessing, I knew there were people who were listening to the subject and were contemplating doing things. So it was vitally important that Maggie, who Tony's just reached out to, and others reached out to certain people, and hopefully, and I will touch base with Maggie. Hopefully, it helped. It was me, and I have met some amazing people from last week. Amazing, good people. Brilliant, brilliant, Emma. Gregory says, connection with people, only I refer to it as a Pandora's box. It should be used for good as a medium to give knowledge, truth rather than evil. Negatively, influence to users, fraud, sex, murder, bullying, dark web, race and trolls, advertising. It doesn't need monitoring and filtering. It does give power to the people. And this is what it is. And Greg's just hit on a great point there. It's power. It gives you an element of power. You have an audience to air off to, and whether that is good news, bad news, indifferent news, you have a audience to attract, to tell people what is on your mindset. And that's powerful, because that's revealing your soul sometimes to the unknown. We don't all know people on social media, so I find it really interesting one, and we will get onto some of the negative stuff, to hear what some people are putting on there without any regard for who might be seeing it on the other end. Okay, so I was saying some of the good stuff it's also about an insight into certain personalities. So certain people you would never have managed to get an insight into and find out a bit more about them through social media, you now can. It's a great way to reach out to people. You can, certain people you thought might not be accessible, certain stars, certain pop musicians, sports stars, you name it, who you potentially thought, do you know what, there's no way I could have a conversation with that person, or actually you can do through certain social media sites. And if you follow some of them, you actually get an insight into the way they are, which tells you more about their personality and the sort of person they are. And police use it for all sorts of things as well. So whether people have gone missing, whether they need to speak to a certain individual, then I think it's been great for police to put something on there, knowing that so many millions and billions of people are using these sites, that potentially it's a good way of tracking people down. So the negative sides now. And sometimes the negative side of this is that you've got basically your own PR machine beside you. And sometimes the emotion of a particular subject or something that's happened to you in life, if you don't handle that emotion well, then basically you've got a powerful tool in front of you to let go your emotions. And once it's let go, it's out there for all to see. So it really is important that you think about, what are you going to put out there? This world's unforgiving, as I found out. It's very unforgiving. They don't realise sometimes people say through things, through hurt and painfulness, what's happened to them. But the emotions of a particular event, something in life, a breaking up of a partnership, a breaking down of trust, that is a time when it really needs to be fought. And sometimes your thought process is not with you, but you need to really think what you're going to put out there, because when you wake up tomorrow, it's another day, and what you put out there may not be the same way you feel. And I've found with a lot of people who are emotionally driven that they've regretted what they've done the next 24 hours. But unfortunately, it's out there. It's a reactive tool, and this tool is at your fingertips. So be careful with that. Pictures. Now this is a really big one. So I heard because I work with under 23s and some young players, and I heard that there's one called Snapchat. Now Snapchat is, I think it's the one that you're supposed to take a picture, and the picture is supposed to dissolve within 10 seconds. So you are led to believe. But when you take this picture on Snapchat, not all the time does the picture dissolve. because I can then capture the picture which you sent to me on my phone if I can take a picture of what is on my phone before the 10 seconds dissolves. So what you find is that there's a lot of young people sending inappropriate pictures of each other's parts, bits, intimate scenes, whatever you want to call it. And once they've sent it, it's then in the hands of the person who's receiving. Now that might be somebody who's just going to look away and just say, okay, great. But actually there's a problem if that person then freezes it. And this happened to a young lady, I think it was in France or Italy, who she fell out with the boyfriend. The boyfriend tried to blackmail her, the one having it. And the story goes where the picture was then released, or pictures were released in the public domain. And if I told you the amount of people who are viewing Facebook and Twitter, which is in the millions and billions, well, this young lady's parts were there to be viewed by millions and billions. And guess what she did? Committed suicide. Brother, look how you've been. Ruth said hi and well done, and keep it going. Oh, thank you very much. Sam, thanks, Sam. Snapchat is the one that makes funny faces. It doesn't just make funny faces, though, from what I'm hearing. And again, it's how you use it, Emma. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I know from some of the youngsters that this is a one that, you know, you can take pictures, send it across, and within 10 seconds it's dissolved. You'll be fine. You've got to be careful. And especially young people, because a lot of young people are, how would I say it, in relationships that may not be long-term relationships. We've all been there as young people, where you think, oh, this is the one, and I'm in love, and oh, I'd do anything for her or him. And then 6 months down the line, something happens, or a year down the line, something happens. Now, if you've been sending pictures and private pictures to this person, what do you think that person might be doing with the intimate pictures that you might be sending to somebody that you think, oh, I'm in love with, oh, we wouldn't do anything, oh, what a great person she is or he is. Because this is a regular occurrence. This is not something that has been made up. And again, everything I say or everything that I try to talk about, I make sure that I do my homework on it, so I know I'm not talking a load of nonsense. It's factual. This is what's happening with a lot of particularly young people who then split up, and somebody has private pictures which can be used to blackmail somebody. And I'm not even going to talk to the lengths of what some people blackmail, especially young, innocent, young, fragile women majority of the time, but also men too. So it's very, very important that you think about what you're taking pictures of, who you're sending pictures to, why you're sending pictures to. Simon says, and he's spot on, you should never be sending pictures like that to another person anyway. I have been with my husband 19 years and I wouldn't send him a nude picture. Children need to be educated. And what you've just said there, Emma, is key. That there is something that we should all say to our children of a particular age. Emma said she's been married for 19 years with her husband, and she's never sent, this is her husband, by the way, she's never sent a nude picture or anything like that to her husband. And children need to be educated. And this is the part about the education about the internet, the social media sites, because on there there's sex, S-E-C-T-S. There's groups who are trying to lull your child, who are trying to pull your child into a certain groups. And some of these groups ain't good. Some of these groups wouldn't get time of day from me, but they're out there. Whether that's sex groups, whether that's old flipping paedophiles are on the internet trawling for young kids. There is a lot of people out there behind the computers, behind Facebook, behind Twitter, behind Snapchat, behind whatever it's called, who do not have the intentions that us on this forum have, which is to use this wonderful tool called social media in the correct way, to educate, to put messages out, PR. There's so many positive charities and stories and things that I see on Facebook, and I think, wow, look at that. Emma says that my son has had it on a school, how to stay safe online, and he is 9. Hi, Brenda. Unfortunately, this generation is known as the I don't care generation. Trying to talk to some kids is like banging your head up a wall. Tony, and I understand that some kids may not want to listen to the older ones. For us, we probably seem like we're deadbeats, we're old news, but all we're trying to do is educate our kids. If we can find some way that, I'm not sure schools do this in schools, but it's a big thing. As I said at the start of it, this is the way the world's going. It's social media. You wouldn't see many 21 and below youngsters now without a phone. You wouldn't find many youngsters between 21 and 13 who do not have access to social media. You just wouldn't. So if so many youngsters have access to social media, if that is an open forum for fraudsters, for paedophiles, for people who are potentially looking to encourage youngsters into certain groups, dynamic, Sept, whatever it may be, then surely the education needs to be given in the schools about this new wave of social media. But, and this is the but, if the schools don't give it, it's imperative that we as adults, we as mature adults should have enough knowledge to be educating our children about the power of social media. It is a powerful tool used by us and sometimes used at us. So going back on the negative side, the pictures, so I've mentioned the pictures. We also potentially lose the ability to communicate. And, in my house, we've made a particular pact, and this is quite funny. We said in our house that between certain hours, we don't use social medias. We shut it down. So between probably 3 hours in the evening, we don't use social media, because the power to interact with one another is powerful. The power to have a conversation, the power to grow together as a family is vitally important. If that wasn't put on, then we'd probably be sitting in here not talking to each other, not finding out about each other's day. So it's important that as a family, you encourage interaction, you encourage children to talk, asked about the day. So you are developing fundamental skills that social media, if not careful, can dampen youngsters' appetite to interact, to talk, to be social. I see it so many times where kids can type so many words in 1 minute, but lose the power to interact with others. I've seen stories where I've gone into certain people's environment and everybody's got their head down and nobody's saying a word to each other. And I feel, how sad's that? So I think you have to allow family time in your home where social media takes a backseat, which allows you to foster certain relationships. And it shows your children the importance. There's nothing worse, and I've done it, there's nothing worse than when somebody's trying to have a conversation with you and that person is just, yeah, you're right. Now, if somebody was doing that to me, I would probably feel, you know what, you're wasting my time. You're not really engaging with me. So I think the power and just to do that and engage with your two eyes to your children and your wife or your other half is so important, that we acknowledge they're in the room, we acknowledge the conversation, we interact, we use our social skills, we talk, we make eye contact, without it being an environment that is constantly, you're on my phone, I'm on yours. If you want to talk to me, you can talk to me, but I'm not really looking up. I'm not really paying interest. I don't really remember what you say because I'm actually typing a message right now. And then I go upstairs, I'm in the bed and I'm on this like this. And then I come downstairs and I'm telling people on my Facebook, what a great day. And I shout, see you, mum. And then I walk to school like this, across the road, just quickly like that. I walk into school and it's really, really worrying. But there's got to be an element of self-control on these social media sites to encourage us as human beings to develop a core ingredient, which is just social skills. So we talked about the family environment. We talked about, obviously, social media allowing access to groups that are maybe not beneficial for youngsters' development. I suppose the key to it really all is education, it's awareness, and it's being open as well. It's being open enough to speak to children about this is the way it should be on Facebook, these social media sites. Anything that is not in line with what you've been educated about, then you need to come and speak to me about it as a parent. But I wouldn't, turn away from the challenge of putting, children who are at an age where they can go on Facebook or they can, but there needs to be a certain amount of education. There needs to be a certain amount of trust. And there needs to be a certain amount of awareness that it's a big conversation. This is the kind of people that are on it. You need to be aware. And that is openness. And I think the trust issue is a big one here, because that's where we're going with this. Do we trust our youngsters enough to be able to sit on these social media sites knowing that there's access to quite a bit of knowledge and quite a bit of negativity? Craig says, whilst at a parent education lesson last week, I heard a crazy story. A lady brought a 2-year-old nephew a book about zoo animals or something for his birthday. She said she gave him the present. He ripped the paper off, looked at the book and took his finger to cover and tried to swipe the page as if he was using a phone. That I say, you should always have eye contact, just like Jeremy Kyle. He looks at the eyes. Hey, Maggie, how are you? I need to speak to you, Maggie, find out how last week went. So, I think that's basically it for this week. Didn't want to go too deep after last week. Last week was really a powerful one, but I think this week is just as powerful. There's some key messages here about social media and how we use it. The important thing is just in conclusion, is not to shy away from the fact that it's here and it's going to be here for a long time. It's got so many million users, billion users, all of the major social media sites do. And they're making lots of money. Obviously, the way they make money is from their advertisements, because there's so many eyes, there's so many people using their social media outlets. So it's here. And I think while something is here, it's important we educate ourselves as parents in a way that can help reduce a lot of problems that our youngsters will face because of their inexperience, their limited knowledge of the world around them. And what you've got to remember is that this is an open door for any Tom, Dick and Harry to come into your house. It basically is an open door for any Tom, Dick or Harry or Suzanne, Donna, whatever the name is, not always men, but predominantly it is men, to come into your house and be right in front of your child. And it's up to you, me, us, as adults, to not shy away from the fact that Facebook is here. It's a great tool to use if used rightly, but you need to be aware that there's one or two people who may not have the same standards, the same values that we have. So I need to sit down and speak to you, my little daughter, my son, and tell you the things that you need to look out for, the things that I don't want you to be looking at. And if this crops up, please let me know. Okay? And also be with them on the sites. It's fun. I'm sure you can have a lot of fun with it. So that, my friends and Facebook family, is this week's. Next week's, I'm not sure what it will be. I'm waiting to be told by you, lovely viewers, exactly what you want me to be talking about next week. This week I chose it because of the back of what was a real tough subject last week. And I suppose that's it. So all that leads me to say to you is have a great week, have a blessed week. Good night and God bless you, and I shall speak to you soon.